Coming to you from UBN Studios in Burbank, California. You are listening to the Unsugar-Coated Podcast with your host, Aalia and Gurr.
Hello, everybody. How are you today? I hope that we find you well. I am not going to lie. I'm struggling. Feel like I have to say that. Probably this is just a moment of authenticity, but I'm really, really happy to be here with everyone who takes the time to listen and takes the time to support. It's been fantastic. And, you know, the person that I have in the studio, I actually have to give the background on what happened. Unsugar-Coated Media is a nonprofit 501c3 company. And we, one of our goals is to create socially conscious media. The podcast is an example. We have books that we put out. We will do films in the future, shorts, all these wonderful media-related projects, but it is geared at helping society. And as part of that journey, I have to tell you that the best part is the other people that I get to meet in this same, nonprofit industry type of world, especially when they're creatives. So last year I happened to be at an event and I was going through the tables and I met an incredibly inspirational woman. She told me her story and she told me what her organization did. And she said she needed volunteers. And I did reach out to her later on. I followed up, and because of her organization during COVID, when I can't do a lot of things, I was actually able, just representing myself, donate my time and help individuals in a facility that housed women with children. They've been through traumatic situations. Some are refugees, some are homeless, some have been abused. But all of these people nonetheless deserve the time and effort of somebody who cares, which I was really thankful for the opportunity to do that. And I created a creative writing workshop with an empowerment twist. And it was just, I can only tell you that over the several weeks that I was able to work with these women, it was incredible for me. There were moments where I got teary-eyed because the gift of giving, the benefit is just the gift of what you receive. And for me to be able to help other people who have gone through significant trauma in their life is very, very critical. I've gone through a lot of trauma in my life. I know what it's like to be forgotten. I know what it's like to be underestimated. I know what it's like to be the underdog and have to fight just to survive. So to have an opportunity, whether it's through my own organization or through another's, it doesn't really matter. If I have something I can offer, I want to give it. So I'm really excited to bring her into the studio today and share with you her incredible and fascinating story, because it's super cool. and we're going to get right to it. I just have to tell you, though, to summarize, my experience with her organization was amazing. And I can genuinely tell you that I gained as much as I gave. I was touched to hear their stories, and I'm honored to have the founder of this nonprofit here today. So let's get to it. Create Now was founded in 1996 by then film and television screenwriter and script supervisor Jill Gurr. It was an experience one late night in South LA that set her on a course that has touched the lives of over 49,000 youth in Southern California's underserved communities through programs in music, dance, fashion, photography, all the arts. This charity especially targets youth who have been abused, neglected, homeless, incarcerated, and dealing with similar challenges. She's been featured on NBC Nightly News and CNN's Anderson Cooper 360, and as part of Everyday Heroes exhibition at the Museum of Tolerance, a TEDx presenter and expert and advocate on mentorship of youth, she authored the comprehensive book, Mentor Youth Now, a guidebook for transforming young lives. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jill Gurr.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I really, really appreciate that you came down and talked to me. As people can probably assess, I'm fascinated by your story. And, I really want to start with that. First, we know that you're now working on the front lines with children, but that's not how you started out working with these. Please tell our audience how you've arrived at this point a little bit.
Well, I had a very exciting career that I strove hard to reach. I worked as a script supervisor on primarily feature films. And that's basically doing continuity and making sure it's a very comprehensive job. Most people in production could say it's probably the toughest job on the set. If anybody screws up, it's our fault for not catching it. And being creative as well. So at times. So I did that, and it was exciting. I traveled all around the world in exotic locations with major movie stars like Sean Connery and Jane Fonda and Gregory Peck, and I mean, it just went on and on. And one night, I worked on Menace to Society, which really woke me up because it was Black Lives Matter back in 1992.
Right.
And then shortly thereafter, I worked on a movie called My Family, Mi Familia, and we were shooting in East LA. It was about 2 in the morning on a Thursday night, and there was an 8-year-old boy and his 11-year-old brother hanging out with the crew. And I said, "Where are your parents?" And the 8-year-old said, "I don't know where my mother is, and my father don't give a bleep." So that really shook me. And I did research, and I discovered that not only is Los Angeles one of the wealthiest, most glamorous cities in the world, we have one of the highest poverty rates. We have more foster children and homeless children than anywhere in the United States. And we have more incarcerated youth than anywhere in the world. So after the LA riots, I was able to teach 2 different screenwriting workshops to groups of incarcerated youth. And it was their stories. I just went into the first one. It was all teenage boys. There were about 30 of them locked up for assault, rape, you name it. And I said, 2 rival gang members end up at a detention camp. Go. And I had the rate back then. It wasn't racially divided. It was the Bloods versus the Crips, or the Norteños, whatever.
Right, the Norteños and the Sureños. Yeah.
But yeah, and so now it's totally shifted, and so I had them pitted against each other. And at the end of this process of working with them and having them improvise the scenes and then transcribing it into screenplay format, going back, having them read it. If a youth couldn't read, he would just say, "No, go." But he would be reading along and learning from what was being read.
Right.
And then another kid might say, "Hey man, I said that last week." And so that really built their confidence. And by the end of it, and some kids came and went, but by the end of it, when we did the final read through, these young teenage thugs were hiding their tears.
Right.
And they were saying, some of them said, "I want to go back to school and I want to apply to college." And I had this, in my book, Mentor Youth Now, I go into more detail, but I had one tough gang leader who resisted me from day one, had a boycott, because the first day, I'm a writer, I'm thinking Hollywood.
Right.
And so I said, "Okay, let's have a happy ending." And he just got, during dinner, he said, "Don't go back. She's BS." And then I finally was able to get him to come back. And he ended up having gang tattoos removed from his neck and his hand. And so after that,
Wow.
and so then I did a second one. I said, "Romeo and Juliet." I went to a co-ed detention facility and I got the same results. And I shared my stories with another writer. And she called the next week and she said, "My producer Leslie Stevens at the American Film Institute wants to give you $5,000 to start a nonprofit." And I didn't know what that was, but after 20 years of being a script supervisor, I was getting burnt out.
Right.
It was really, I wanted to make a difference. I didn't want to spend my life saying, "Oh, your button should be opened," or "Don't forget this line," or "What about that angle?" I wanted to make a difference.
Right.
So this was an opportunity, and I built it with people coming on and helping me, later on. And if I could do it, anybody can.
Sure. No, absolutely. 2 things stuck out to me when you said that. I couldn't help it. Well, when the kid said, "Don't," the perfect ending. It's just very interesting. I mean, I even have to say, I have to throw in my own when people look at one of my books and I don't have a perfect ending at the end necessarily that some people would prefer. I'm like, but that's because that's the reality. I want to give the Hollywood fairy tale Disneyland. At the same token, and as a creative, maybe I'll give you a little bit, but and so I say that out of when you're working with young youth, authenticity and them knowing, because they're let down so much, right? Like, how many times did you come up against a kid? It had nothing to do with you. It's just that you might have represented somebody else who had let them down. Mm-hmm. Like, these are kids who somebody else just couldn't be there for them. And so when you've handled the resistant kids, like how did that shape? And, I mean, honestly, I feel like the more difficult cases or difficult circumstances polish you. And because now you work with all these kids, you do an amazing array of programs that you create. And all I had to do as a volunteer, which is why I love this part of the interview, because I'm not talking about your organization as if I don't know. I know that when I signed up to be a volunteer, your coordinator, Lola, which we love and have to give her amazing shout out.
Absolutely.
She worked so hard. Of course there were changes because COVID has made things difficult. Like, okay, so so normal day-to-day activities for Create Now prior to COVID.
Mm-hmm.
People went into the facilities, taught a painting class, taught a music class, taught a writing class, and then COVID. A lot of the institutions that house these children had to make changes they were not prepared for, right? How has Create Now been able to really come in and offer some support for these organizations?
So thank you for bringing that up, because many of the agencies we serve don't have the capacity to do very much right now. They're barely able to get food and shelter, or they're shut down entirely. So many of them are, because we have schools, we have foster group homes, we have emergency shelters, we have transitional living housing.
Right.
So people might be in a low-income house. It doesn't mean that they can't keep going, but we target the kids that are really in need, the kids that are in the group homes and the shelters who have no family. And that's what breaks my heart,
Right.
because all of us are going through the pandemic with COVID. We're going through all of the, the riots and everything else going on. We're going through this election coming up and all of what's going on in politics. But imagine what these children have to go through
Exactly.
with no families. And as an example, we worked, there is the original Los Angeles orphanage was in the 1800s, and it was bought by a monastery, a group of nuns, and it's called Maryvale, and they're in Rosemead in East LA. And so they had a residential unit ever since, and we would always serve them with about 60 teenage girls living there. 90% had been sexually abused. And then, so we, right before the COVID hit, we had launched a fashion design program. And many of these girls are being sex trafficked. They're dealing with severe domestic violence and all kinds of stuff. So they loved it. We brought in a team of incredible designers. We get them tons of top quality fabrics and beads and jewelry and whatever. They were in heaven. And in just 4 classes, they had designed phenomenal outfits. And we're planning a fashion show event next year, because this program will pick up again at Hillsides as soon as it's safe.
Right.
So what happened is, so we had to break in March. And so Maryvale, after 450 years, whatever, of being a refuge for these young women, decided in the middle of COVID to shut down that whole residential unit.
Oh, no.
And they shipped them off to all different places. And so imagine having an average foster youth has anywhere from 5 to 20 placements by the time they turn 18. And then the government kicks them out and says, good luck, you're on your own.
Right.
And they have no skills, no family. I met a young lady once whose mother left her in a trash bin at birth. And she was rescued. And years later, she went to meet her mother. And her mother said, you look just like your father. I wish you died the first, when I killed you. Get out. So imagine the trauma that these kids are dealing with, and then to only be thrown out into this chaotic world that's going on right now.
Right. No, well, as I said at the beginning, I'm struggling as an individual, and I have outlets, I have resources, I have a support system, and I'm still struggling. So I can only imagine what it's like for these young kids, and especially knowing at my life. To just remind my audience, I was homeless at 14 years old. I was on the street staying in Kaiser ICU waiting rooms because I had nowhere to go. I think that when you bring up mentorship and the difference it makes, a lot of times people think, what can I do to make a difference? And even in our case, it actually, ironically enough, made it a little bit easier because of COVID for you and I to be able to collaborate so that I could teach it from my home and still be safe and still provide something for these, young ladies to look forward to. And for anyone who's like, well, what does creative writing have to do with empowerment? By the way, it celebrates the ability to create connection, education, and healing through storytelling. And for personally, I had used this program to dive into how writing can help these people who do know trauma to be aware of situations. Journaling helps you identify your emotions better, your circumstances better, can help you create a more healthy way to tackle the problems you're going to face in life. Also learning how to advocate for yourself, learning how to write your landlord a letter and say, listen, I need you to reduce my rent because this, or writing, one of the girls wanted to go to medical school. So talking about how do you write a resume? How do you write an application? So to speak to some of the statistics that you speak of in general, and we're just going to keep it to students and how important, because it's not just a kid in a foster home who needs mentorship, like all of our youth in general can use it. So students who meet regularly with their mentors are 52% less likely than their peers to skip a day of school and 37% less likely to skip a class. Youth who meet with their mentors are 46% less likely than peers to start using illegal drugs and 27% less likely to start drinking. 76% at-risk young adults who had a mentor to aspire, 76% of at-risk youth who had a mentor caused them to enroll in and graduate from college versus half of at-risk young adults who had no mentor at all. So for you and what you've seen, and you've helped tens of thousands of youth over the years, how do you see these statistics? Like, how do you, so a lot of times, and here's actually more specifically, a lot of times people will say those statistics aren't real. Like, how have you in real life seen the difference impact these kids who might not have wanted to go to college, or, if it had it not been for your influence or a program that you put them in touch with?
Well, I think the best story we could share, and her YouTube video, we just put it up. She's phenomenal. Her name is Tasha Caulfield. So Tasha grew up in a very poor part of Los Angeles called Baldwin Hills, Crescent, whatever. Was from a poor part, a very abusive family, all kinds of abuse. Started running away from home at age 12. And between 12 and 14 was in 9 detention facilities. And then Create Now came along. And I had a wonderful volunteer who was a TV writer. She wrote on Married with Children and also Fresh Prince, and she volunteered. And the kids all did a group project of Moesha, anyway, she bonded with Tasha, as I did. And between us and all of the resources that Create Now brought to her, Tasha graduated from USC Film School with a scholarship from Warner Brothers. She attended law school for a year in Chicago, traveled all around the world, produced and directed a documentary about how to break into stand-up comedy, and is a stand-up comedian who's performed all around the country. She's published books and written scripts and has a real estate license. So, and she's only like 35. So how many other Tashas are out there that would have, she says, if it wasn't for Create Now, I would still be in jail somewhere.
Exactly. Well, exactly. How many more of them are there out there? Mm-hmm. So funny. My 13-year-old daughter, she's having a tough time at home. And I often, I think having an awareness that, first of all, let me back up. That's incredible. That's incredible that you were able to create that much impact through your organization. That must feel so well. I think it's going back to that. People underestimate what someone else is capable of. But when someone like yourself or other creatives, because, other people can do this too, take the time to help someone else, you just never know what you could be doing. And I know that mentoring reduces depression in our youth. It helps them become less suicidal. It helps them deal with social acceptance. And it just overall helps them have a better academic attitude. But on top of it, like, life is hard, right? So you give them this idea of how to manage things. Let's go to why art is so important with that. Because we were talking about that before. Like, we're creatives and we love that we can take what we do now, couple it, like you said, you love film. I mean, I'm sure hanging out with Sean Connery on set was pretty boring for you. I mean, it must have been rough, right?
It was really hard.
And FYI, when she was saying that, I'm laughing because I remember when we were going through the pictures, I was like, dang, there's all these pictures of Jill online with like this. And we were just naming off the different actors we saw you with, and you were like, oh, how cute. She's like, so that definitely, I mean, I can understand the burnout part because my husband day to day and what I see go through, but being able to couple what you're doing with art, how do you feel art itself makes such an impact and why it is so important for our youth to really, I know there's some people out there, well, if you're going to give them skills, sure, yeah, I know, I get it. Teach them the stock market, teach them something that's quote unquote useful. But let's talk about the arts and how you've seen, like your thoughts on that.
Well, there's so much research, and you can go to our website at createnow.org. We have the impact tab. We'll show you the research that's been done, and there's so much more out there about how the arts affect youth academically, with everything in so many levels. It does. For instance, we have an early education music program for pre-K children called Ready to Learn. And it has been scientifically proven, and we have been proving it in top, pre-K universities, all of that, that if you teach a child how to keep a steady beat at a young age, that it does something to their brain neurons and it accelerates their reading and language fluency. So we got a grant from Supervisor Hilda Solis, and we, just as one example, enacted this last year at ELAC, East LA College, and we had about 300 children. And the school officials and teachers are saying, oh, my God, the changes in these kids and behavior and everything, learning to speak, and especially because LA has such many of our children, we're 55% of our population is Latinx. And so, we have children who are just learning to speak, and they need that bridge, and just our own children. So it's been proven again and again. But the other thing about the arts is that we have record numbers of kids dropping out of school, especially in middle school. They start by high school, and it's 50% pretty much of the inner city youth, as opposed to regular kids, regular with quote marks. And so when you cut arts, what are they going to do? They are so far behind. If you go to great schools and you look up any school in South LA or East LA or parts of the Valley, most of the Valley, you will find they are so far behind the rest of the state academically, let alone the rest of the world,
right.
and especially in math in those areas. So, for instance, we have a STEAM program. It used to be called STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, because our students are so far behind the rest of the world and need that. They realized, oh, you don't have an engine without the arts. Let's add A. So it's now called STEAM.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a STEAM program where where the kids take recycled material, plastic bottles, cardboard boxes, and they reconstruct for the elementary and middle school kids. It could be create a playground where they create they work in teams, so they're learning teamwork, and they're learning how to measure and how to scale and all of that stuff. And then the older youth can create a city. So they're learning civic engagement and urban planning, and all, and about the environment and all of that. And so that's a direction we go with our school-based programs. Or if we have funding, we bring it to kids at some of the agencies that we serve, because we have over 100 in our network. And the way Create Now operates is, and this is a model, other communities in other countries might want to do, or places. Because there's a lot of resources out there. And what we do is we bring them together, and we operate with 4 pillars. So there's Create Now Connect, where we connect volunteers with kids in shelters or group homes in their own neighborhood or close to their neighborhood. There's Create Now, and we also connect companies that want to donate materials or resources. There's Create Now in the classroom. And that's where we do more comprehensive programs, where we're able to track the measurements, because it's hard to get funding, like you mentioned, and funders want metrics and know that milestones have been reached. And so those are mostly our school-based classes. Then it's cultural journeys. We bring thousands of kids every year to concerts and plays at Disney Hall and Hollywood Bowl and Cirque du Soleil. I mean, just amazing experiences. And we've had kids, like we had one youth who went to see a play at the Ford Amphitheater, and it was a takeoff on Hurricane Katrina called Noah's Ark. And it was about a family stranded on a rooftop. And after we asked the kids, because many of these youth don't know social skills, they don't know how to say please or thank you. So we asked them to, after they attend our cultural journeys programs, to create a thank you card, which we give to the donors. And it's also, the donors love it as well. And one kid shared that after seeing that play, he had an epiphany about something his mother did or why she treated him a certain way. And he had this realization, and he couldn't wait to tell her and to apologize.
Mm.
And it just makes me tear up when I share that story, how attending one performance. So, and the thing with mentoring is that there's so many different types. Most people think, oh, I can't commit the rest of my life one-on-one. Well, I explain how there's all kinds. You could do group mentoring or team mentoring. So maybe a group of your associates at work want to go in. So if somebody has to miss a meeting, the rest of the team is there. What we do primarily is group mentoring, where we'll have one or a team of mentors teaching a group of kids. It might be only 2 or 3 or 4 kids. And very often one-on-one mentorships evolve from that. We don't specialize in one-on-one mentorship, except right now we are doing that. And so another way is family mentoring. Maybe your family can mentor another family. There's all kinds of ways to do it. And as an example, when I first started Create Now, I found out that there are 2 juvenile detention facilities in Malibu, in the heart of Malibu. There's actually 3 in Malibu. Most people don't know they're there. They keep them hidden in the trees and just a little sign. And 2 of them are right next door to each other. And each of the camps had about 100 teenage boys locked up for serious crimes. This was a boot camp with barbed wire and the works. Wow. And so I was able to get them to bring all the kids together. And I recruited judges. I had a competition. I had music, dance, and poetry. I had music, dance, and there was art as well. And I got trophies and I got prizes and I had judges that worked in the industry. And from that, the incredible relationships that to this day that have continued, kids that flourished from those opportunities. And normally in those camps, in a big bunkhouse with all these kids, they're all fighting with each other, but they were all suddenly cheering for their camp members and bonding was going on. And somebody would realize that some kid they were picking on was actually pretty good, right?
Right.
And then I gave them all prizes afterwards. Not only did they get trophies and cash prizes for the winners, but I made sure that the kids that sang got to go to a recording studio. I got them offered scholarships to go to Art Center. Only one kid was thinking about it, went with me on a visit, and then got scared. And then I made an arrangement for the poetry kids to do a live poetry reading at Beyond Baroque in Venice. And those were life-changing. And so one of those kids stayed with me. Now, his name is Durante. He's featured, if you go to our website, there's, when I was on NBC Nightly News, they featured Durante. He had been arrested for hitting someone over the head with a crowbar. Very large black guy, very scary looking. Mm-hmm. And he loved to sing and he got really into it and he kept in touch with me. And I would get, for instance, a booth at Showbiz Expo and I would have some of the kids there. And I got him, he was there and he got cast in a film called Gang Tapes, which won awards. He was actually nominated for a supporting actor award. He was amazing. He is amazing. He's an amazing young man. So he, as a mentor, he would call me every now and then. He would say, "Hey, Jill, I got a question. A buddy of mine got a girl pregnant. What, and maybe he did have a buddy and the buddy needed help, but I got the feeling that he needed guidance and he didn't know who to go to. And he ended up working with his brother. He became a trucker, a very successful truck driver. And he formed his own 501c3 nonprofit with his brother called Truck Dads. And they're going to train ex-cons how to be truck drivers and help them get jobs. So here's a young man who was incarcerated for a violent crime, who is now giving back, And it didn't take that much. It was guidance when they needed it.
Right, exactly. I often talk about my experience when I was younger. I shared it with the women at the home. I don't have a perfect past. I got in trouble when I was younger. When I look at statistics, I know I lived it. I was more likely to do things because I didn't have the support and I didn't have the mentorship. Technically, I have to say, we're all being mentored, but it's not always a positive mentor we having. The drunk dad is mentoring his kid. He's just not mentoring him to grow up and be as good as he needs to be. And he's obviously not providing a good role model status for him. But when I talk about my background and I talk about making a mistake at 18 years old and sitting in a jail cell for, a silly thing. And there were so many years of my life that I stuffed that story under the rug, man. That was a skeleton in my closet. I did not want it to fall out because I was embarrassed. Of course, I knew it was a stupid thing I had done. I was 18 years old. But I was 18 years old,
Yeah.
And the reason why some people will be like, I really wouldn't tell anybody that story is because I want other people to feel permission to know that good people do bad things and bad things happen to good people. I don't, we focus so much on putting people in jail, and we know that in the jail systems there isn't an education, or an opportunity. We should be truly rehabilitating certain individuals, and we don't. And you've gone into these places without I guess I'm asking you, was there ever a time when you were afraid of feeling like, am I doing something that I might be jeopardizing my safety or something? Did you ever feel like that?
No, only mainly because what Create Now offers, what I was doing back then was, I ended up I had tried for a year to get into the probation camps to teach writing, and they wouldn't return my calls. And then when the riots happened, I joined a volunteer group, and I met this wonderful woman named Wanda Patterson. And she said, we would love your screenwriting workshop. And she was their art director. And it's the only camp, I think, other than Kilpatrick, that has an art center, or she had a bungalow. And so she was always there with me, with her assistants, and there's guards around. And so I knew that, yes, there was that risk that somebody might attack me. But I felt that they really appreciated me. I was an outsider, and they were so grateful that somebody cared. Like, for instance, we had a jazz musician singer and her band who played at the W every weekend and had celebrities and following her. And she and her band went out to a foster group home out in Riverside on a Saturday to give them a little concert and to talk with about 12 teenage boys. And all they kept saying was, thank you for caring about us.
That's amazing. Yeah. We just, a person just wants to be seen, and children in those situations, gosh, I was telling my son the other day, like I go back to those times in my life, and I think about what it's like to be young and to feel that the people who were supposed to take care of you, your mom and dad, didn't, or they didn't love you, or they died, or something tragic happened. And, to be able to go in and make a difference, it's incredible. When you look at how you're going to be able to continue doing this, I know I'm glad that you had brought it up earlier, because you definitely do a lot all throughout Southern California. I know you don't just do South LA, you touch lives throughout. Are there other organizations, like you had said it earlier, but to the person in Wisconsin who's like, wow, I'd love to do this in my neighborhood? Are there organizations like yours throughout?
Well, what I highly recommend is a website called mentoring.org. And I think they're based in DC or back east. And when you put in your zip code, they will give you a list of all the local mentoring organizations in your community. And in my book, I have a whole chapter on how you could start your own. Like you go through churches, and there's all different ways where you can start your own.
Sure.
Local libraries. So there's just be creative. Just be follow what you want to do. Like, I get people calling me a lot saying, I want to start my own nonprofit. I'm a fashion designer and I want to teach it. And what I encourage them to do is, rather than trying to start your own, because there is so much work that goes into that, and I put my writing career on the side. I know if I put a fraction of that work into my writing career, I would be a very successful filmmaker right now.
Be watching you at one of the award shows, I'm sure.
Yes. But in any case, there are so many nonprofits that are looking for volunteers. Now, Create Now, we've got volunteers. We're always looking for new ones, artists especially, and we're especially looking for donations right now, because we're very small. Most people think we're this huge nonprofit with a dozen people. There's only 3 of us, and actually only 2 currently working on a salary. So and so it's very hard to pay for art supplies. We're shipping cameras and art supplies and paints to kids all over the area. We've got currently a foster group home in Orange County with teenage girls who have been sexually trafficked, abused, abandoned, the works. We started the summer with fine art painting. They made canvases. Then they did belly dancing, and now they're receiving cameras and iPads to do photography. We just launched at an emergency shelter near downtown Angels Flight Shelter. They have kids, teenagers that have either run away from home, been thrown out of their homes. This happens a lot with the LGBTQ community as well, or kids that have been left homeless. Because what often happens with a family that is homeless, they will put the family in a shelter, but they'll force a teenage boy, to live elsewhere.
Right.
So then you have some kid who's miserable because he's separated from his family and he shouldn't be there, and as none of them should.
Right.
So we just launched, and the kids love it, a culinary arts workshop with a very popular Food Network chef. So that's going on, and we'll be promoting these. We're starting to promote these more. We have a team of volunteers. We're always looking for volunteers for our marketing committee, and I'm excited to report that on December 5th, we're hosting a virtual fundraising benefit called Sip and Paint.
Right.
So the Sip and Paint is where you can receive a kit with either family arts and crafts supplies, including a fabulous book by the artist Brian Yanish, and he'll take you through it, where the kids will make puppets out of tissue boxes. And the book shows all kinds of arts and crafts projects you can do with junk at home.
Mm-hmm.
And then later at 7, then we'll have a break, and the host is Deborah Wilson from Mad TV. Tasha is going to be making an appearance. And then from 7 to 8, the adults will learn how to paint. I think the artist who's wonderful, J. Michael Walker, is going to use a wine bottle and some grapes or something behind it. And then from 8 to 9, people will have an auction. We'll be hosting an auction if you have items to donate. And then you can learn more and then there'll be a chance to party and get to know each other. So it'll be on our website and on the social media where we'll be launching the marketing. Right now, it's a save the date on December 5th. So I mean to go on about that. But that money is what's helping us to do these programs right now, because our funding mostly comes from school-based programs, and the schools are shut down.
Right.
So we're operating on operating funds that we can't afford. So when we're sending these supplies and such, it's a challenge. So I'll just leave it there.
No, of course, absolutely. Look, the audience we have are people who do care. I mean, at least that's what I hope many of you do, and that's okay if it's funny. Actually, while you're talking, though, I can't help but think maybe if Create Now can ever. Is there an opportunity? I know I'm like brainstorming on the podcast, making it really interesting, but I can't help but think about how some kids or some youth that aren't actually in, there's two things I want to say, but one of them is just, I was thinking about how my daughter is struggling and she wants to find a connection. I wish that there was like a Zoom creative class that she could just art or something that, not necessarily therapy, because I know therapists require, a lot more. But I mean, if there are kids out there who aren't in foster homes, but they are struggling just as much because of what's going on in COVID. They can't go to class. They can't create anything. And the only outlets they have, unfortunately, to become familiar with other kids is social media, which is a little bit scary at times because you don't know who all these kids are. And, so it's funny when you talk about that, I couldn't help but wonder if there's a way, maybe if you don't, somebody else out there is going to come out with the idea. But if so, I've got a teenager for you who needs some projects. But the other thing is when you said that earlier, so when I first started my first nonprofit, I remember I called it my friend Matthew Zachary, who's the founder of Stupid Cancer. And I was like, hey, Matthew, I'm so inspired by my journey with cancer. I want to start an organization to help other women. And one of the things he said to me was, well, is there any other organization doing what you'd like to do? Because not only is it tough, to be quite honest, there's a lot of nonprofits and it's better. There are some that compete against each other for funds. They're all, so if you have an opportunity, to be honest, if you don't have an ego and you're willing to contribute your time to an already existing and collaborating and supporting, he said that would be your best first step. Now, if you find that the thing that you want to do is not anywhere, it's not a resource that's really readily available. And in my particular case, it was for this is Cancer's Family One Day at a Time Foundation, which is another foundation I have. And that helps mothers with young children in the home while going through cancer, or families, mother and fathers who are going through treatment, who have young children in the home. We would do things like pay for clothing for children. We would pay for electricity bills at times, gas bills at times, food cards, just whatever we could, little efforts to help people get through chemo or the financial issues going through cancer had put them through. And he said that to me. So because mine was a little bit unique, I'm saying all of that to say, sorry, that was is that when I realized that not really anyone else was doing that, okay, fine, then it made sense for me to try and start that. But that is in itself, again, why I love your story. I am the founder of a nonprofit, but I don't do what you do. And in that way, and I love how you do it. So it was not even an afterthought of why wouldn't I help this organization. And when we think about, like you said, there are so many children dropping out of school. There are like the statistics and why, what do you think for every kid out there, to have a positive role model? I mean, for you growing up, who was your positive role model? I'm just going to go into your background a little bit more. Like, who was the person who made you say, I'm going to be able to get through life okay?
I think my mother. My mom always encouraged me. I started writing as soon as I could write. I would write stories and poems, and I would give them to her to read. And she would always encourage me and say, "Oh, that's really wonderful. That's good. Keep it up." And her dream was actually to be a journalist. And she got married very young after the war, and had babies very soon, and became a housewife. And I think along the way, I've met people, and too many to name, but it's something internal. And I think I really feel that children show at a young age their intrinsic talents and who they're going to be. So the fact that I started writing at such a young age, and I communicate much better through writing than speaking or anything else. And then starting at around 8 or 9, I used to organize talent shows in my neighborhood. I'd be hanging out with my friends and we'd be bored, and I'd say, let's put on a show. Who can sing? Who can dance? Let's charge our parents 50 cents and we'll split the money. And I put these shows on and throughout until I became like 15 or so, And that's what I'm doing with Create Now. That's pretty much, that's what I look at. The first thing I did was I put on a talent show at those 2 detention camps.
Right.
That was the first big thing I did. I had just started the organization. I brought a group of writers to a juvenile detention facility. One of them bonded with a girl and became her mentor. And the girl wrote a script that got optioned. And at one point, was almost made. And so it grew from there. Then I said, all right, I'm going to put on a talent show.
Right.
And so I think that children, when they're into trucks or whatever it is that they're into, that I bet you it's a predecessor of where they're headed. And as long as parents encourage them to do whatever it is that they want within reason and safety, I think it's good. I know there are parents who will say, you can't do that. You have to follow in our family's footsteps and do this career. Right. And there are youth that don't want to do that. They have other dreams. That's a typical story. So I was very lucky to have both my parents. My father, he was a workaholic. He was an electrician, a working class workaholic, wasn't around that much, fell asleep. I was there working to put me through college. And so he wasn't interested in reading my scripts when he came home after working all that time. Anyway, right. I think that as parents are out there, are people who are having children, that it's important to encourage them to follow their excitement.
For sure. And this is something I don't want to miss an opportunity to ask you, because once again, going back to you have experience, you work with a lot of kids in underserved communities. When people talk about the systemic racism that does exist within our school systems to some extent, when you've worked with these kids, what have you noticed in comparison to maybe what some of the more affluent neighborhoods get,
I'll tell a story that really surprised me when it happened. It was a number of years ago. We on our cultural journeys, we were given tickets to the Los Angeles concert, a beautiful concert. I forgot the name of the concert company, and it was at the Norton Simon Museum, and they have the gardens in the back and the balcony. And so a group of foster boys, about 12 of them from Riverside, came, and they were exploring the museum. The museum was open before the concert. And a group of seniors were there as well, who also got tickets to this event through my contact. And so those guards suddenly went up as these boys were just observing the artwork. And they started saying, get away from there, don't touch that. And started profiling them.
Right.
And their guardian and chaperones were saying, well, they didn't do anything. And they ended up throwing them out of the museum because they accused them of doing that. And the seniors who were there clarified that the kids did nothing wrong.
Right.
And so that shows how society, and and it's a shame too that with the protests that are going on right now with Black Lives Matter movement, that there are looters and kids. Those are the
Of
kids
course.
I was working with. And a lot of that comes from the anger and the frustration that they felt all their lives, and they lash out, and it's like, F you, I'm fed up with this. I'm going to
Right.
fight back and get mine.
Right.
And if you notice during the latest riots in Santa Monica and during this latest event, there were white suburban girls there looting as well.
Oh, right, right. I actually had taken a video of one, and I'd seen, there was a lot of times when it's like not all, not everything is what it appears to be. It appears to be one way, but we know that there's other people going in there causing issue, causing disturbance, creating the smoke and mirrors. And at the same token, yes, you're absolutely right. There are a segment of our population that are very frustrated. And, I think that personally, and I said this in one of my other, I think that as a person who's been part of this country all of my life, I've never seen racism truly dealt with the way that it should have been in this country. It was more of like when slavery ended, it was kind of like swept under, okay, fine, you're here. And like, it was never really addressed. It was just covered up. And because of that, we, and yes, there have been progress. I've said this before, but not enough. And when it comes to these young kids who, yes, oftentimes they are Black, Latinx community, they are maybe not as, well off. Maybe they don't have as good a vocabulary. They matter. They deserve mentorship. Every mentorship matters when it comes to really solving the problems that we have. And just the reason I asked that, because I know for myself, when you talk about the communities, I lived in PVE. I lived in Palos Verdes Estates, which is it's a very beautiful, small, affluent community. And we moved out there for the schools. Schools are some of the best in California. In fact, I think PV High is the number 3 high school in California. My son in 7th grade was getting, he was already working on a, oh my goodness, why am I, with the ID printing, the 3D printing machine. My son was already doing 3D printing in 7th grade in Palos Verdes. And then when the drive was so far, we ended up moving back, and we moved into View Park, which people around LA, the Black Beverly Hills, as it is referred to. And being part of that community was it was a good experience for my kids to see, but I felt for them because I knew I couldn't put my kids in those public schools. There was no way I was going to be getting my son in off of Slauson. Was he going to be getting a 3D printer type of education? And so this is why I asked that. We're not going to cure racism in this country, but I really want to say my hat's off to you for not turning an eye to what, just felt you felt compelled to make a difference in these communities.
Well, I think when I saw those 2 little children on the street in the middle of the night, I thought, how many other kids are out there? They're not even in the foster system. They're just on the street with no parental guardianship. And even if they are at home, the abuse and the violence that they have to experience. And through the 24 years, or actually 28 since I started working with them, it just brings it home to me more and more. This is not our future. This is our present.
This is our present.
This is our life, and they're ignored, and it's not fair. And when you get to hear these kids' stories, and you get to meet them, and you see how sweet they are, so many of them, and how if I had been in their shoes, I might be in the same position.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so true. Jill, thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing your stories. I hope, I know our audience will have gained some valuable information, and I hope that people will come forward and help and offer time and resources and donations, because it matters, and you're doing a wonderful, important thing. Once again, for our audience, please tell them your website and where they can follow you on social media or support. How do you want our audience to support Create Now? Where can they go?
Well, thank you. Our website is createnow.org. Our most of our handles are just Create Now, but on Instagram it's Create Now Arts. That's our social media sites. We're also on LinkedIn and Pinterest, but we're if you can find most of it on the website. That's where everything is pretty much focused on right now.
Sure. Well, my hat's off again, and I hope that people will continue to help you. You're doing wonderful things. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Aalia. I'm so grateful for the time to be here.
Yes, we will have you back again. Everyone, please stay tuned for more next week. We'll keep it coming. Thank you for letting us be unsugarcoated. And by the way, do support. If you can't help create now specifically, though, go to a nonprofit, go out there and look and see what you can do. It matters. And honestly, if you are dealing with some things right now because of COVID, it might actually even help you, give you something to think about. So just remember, you often get more out of giving. Take care, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.
It's so strange, I'm not holding my tongue. Radio making me feel so numb. Stolen beats, they're on repeat. But come on, don't we all wanna be someone? Yeah, it's killing me, but I just wanna be a millionaire.
What are you still doing here? Come back next week.